The 60s, the 70s, the original.
Oldies 98.9 WORC-FM, Webster, Worcester.
WORC-FM, Oldies 98.9, the greatest hits of the 60s and 70s. Welcome back to the Worcester Radio Reunion. It's Dave O'Gara here, as usual at this time of the day, but we're doing things a little bit differently today. We've got live in-studio guests, and we're bringing back some voices from the Worcester airwaves. We've talked to Joe Coggins Jr., who spans back to the 50s and through the late 60s. We just had on Bill Garcia, who was here for the first half of the 60s and also was on other radio stations in town, so is a pretty well-known name. All right, so we're spanning the decades. We've moved from the 50s and the 60s. We'll move into the early 70s right now as we bring in a couple of characters from back in that era. Clyde Anderson is sitting over my far left here, and Gary Scott. Welcome, gentlemen. Nice to have you
welcome,
here.
Dave. How are you?
I'm just fine. Great to have you guys on.
Thank you very much.
I can't see Clyde. You're in the way. Yeah, pull your mic
now,
back
you guys are both still on the radio. I'm no longer on the radio. As I recall, you talking to one of these things. Is that how it works?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Actually,
I'll help you along, Clyde. Don't worry.
Thank you very much.
We brought Clyde in special to do a station identification for us one day, you know, so we do hear Clyde on the air.
Do I get the same amount I have always gotten for those?
This is just
station and others.
Doesn't this feel like,
Once
you're
you
part
get
of
into the computer, you hear your voice all the time. People are always saying to me, wow, you must be doing great. I hear your voice all the time. I don't get anything for that.
No.
But I
got
got
the
satisfaction.
T-shirt.
Hey, along those lines, not that we're really talking about this, but I heard a guy yesterday talking about the fact that he was in a TV show that's rerun every now and then, and he gets a residual check for like 99 cents every now and again. So,
I would take it.
Yeah, so if the 99-cent residual is common to TV, you can imagine what the residual is for radio.
This is just like a reunion of Golden Girls, I feel.
Well, let's...
I mean,
hey,
if
wait a
we're
minute.
going to do that, that's what I feel like.
We might mention Gary Scott, for those of you going on vacation this summer. You can head up to Portland, Maine. Is doing oldies, the same format we are. At what station?
Definitely. WYNZ Oldies 100.9 up there, right in Portland.
All right, we'll be heading up there in August. I'll be checking that out. And Clyde is joining us today for the first time on the Worcester Airways on a regular... when was the last time you did a regular shift?
I think it was about 79. I did Saturday nights for a few months, and that was it.
Let's talk about the early days, because I want to get into some stories.
Do we have stories?
As a matter of fact, I asked John just some of the stories if we could use them, and he said, well, a couple of them I don't think so. We had fun in those days, that's for sure.
When did you do your first shift on the old ORC?
It was about June of 1970. I was on in time for the last two Beatles songs. That's how I measured time.
Let It Be and Long and Winding Road?
You got it. Those were still new singles when I had just gotten on ORC.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing to think about how quote-unquote, an oldies act the Beatles really are. But to us, there's the old Beatles from like the 64 era, and then there's like the current Beatles.
It's the truth, because you got to admit that they never really went away. Here's a band that has a number one album, and they haven't even been together since 69. So goes to show you how the music is kind of different now.
The two guests I've had on thus far today were guys that I listened to growing up on the radio, and I'm guessing you guys did too, but you two are guys that I worked with all through the 70s, and we had some enjoyable times back in those days. Now, Clyde said he started in 1970. You started when?
I started doing Sunday morning tapes, which I think everybody started doing. I mean, it was $2 an hour, folks, back then. So,
well, the morning drive guy was getting $2.50.
Yeah. No, but I started, I was a senior in high school at South High, where you're a graduate of. I was a senior there doing that, and just hung around the radio station. It was those days where you could do that, and if you hung around long enough and pestered the program director long enough, you got on the air.
Why did the name Johnny Dowd come to mind when you say that?
I'm still doing the same thing.
Yeah. No, you don't have a paintbrush in your hand anymore. That's the difference.
Well, we were on in an interesting era in radio, because the music, I think, was really undergoing a change from the 60s into the 70s. It was, I think it was all about the music in the 70s, wasn't it?
Well, it was. Like Clyde and I were used to talk about this. You would be playing Led Zeppelin. You would be playing the Beatles. You did a country act like Patsy Cline, all in the same radio station.
The same 15 minutes.
Yeah, in the same 15 minutes. And it was great. people, ORC was the number one place.
There's just no means for that to be done now. You take cable television, there's 100 channels for people to choose from, and everybody has their little niche, and it's sort of the same way in radio, but you're absolutely right.
You know what seems to me must be one of the coolest things for guys like you on the radio even today is we were playing records, of course, and you can now go to the bathroom and not worry about the record skipping.
Yeah, Joe Coggin said the same thing.
Well, it's the truth. What's the old line? If you couldn't do it in 2.5 minutes, you didn't.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Gary.
You have to do that. But
now, to help people reminisce a little bit about people who were on the radio back, and then Clyde, when you first started, who were your compatriots on the air at the time?
Well, let's see. The guy that hired me was Norm Laramie, who was really more carpenter than program director. But
we have some great Norm stories. Yeah.
We'll get into one of those.
We've got to get to one of those. There's a really good one. Bob Frost was a midday guy. Of course, BJ was there, from 1900 to 1970?
BJ Dean. I'll be honest, we tried to find BJ Dean, and we can't. We know a little something about what he's doing.
He fell asleep in the car down there or something.
Actually, I talked with, we're going to have on at some point this afternoon for a little bit, Philip James Lages, who was a newsman during the whole era we're talking about.
Yeah. And how about this? He was a newsman with us. Now NASA will not lift a shuttle without Phil's okay.
That's exactly
Isn't that
right.
Incredible?
Is it true that when he left ORC, he went down to NASA to become the voice of mission control?
That's what he applied for.
I think he applied for that. He never got that.
Did he apply for that?
But he still works there. I talked with him yesterday morning. He still works for NASA. Yeah. So he went from Worcester Radio to NASA.
Yeah.
Now there's a flying leap.
So he's still in space. Still in space shot.
So he basically sucked in all of the good stuff that could happen to any of us, and then there was the rest of us.
That's right.
There was nothing left. So Phil Lages was the newsman back in those days. And who do you remember, Gary? Maybe other names.
Chris Roberts. I think you two shared the morning show there for a while.
Right.
Middays, I think it was Dick Smith was doing middays when I was there. BJ Dean did afternoons. Clyde did nights. And then when I first started, I was doing the all-night show because you had gone to mornings, I believe.
That's right. I did all nights for a while. And then the morning guy just stopped showing up one day. So Norm Laramie was the boss at the time. And he said, you think you could do this every day, Dave? Because I can't count on the other guy to come in. And that's how I got started doing the morning drive show. But this guy, Norm Laramie, also hired me. Well, actually, let me take that back. Len Talbot, rest his soul. Len passed away last year. Len Talbot hired me to work a Saturday night shift. Actually, my first job was working, because I had what they used to call in those days a first-class radio telephone license. And when you worked at an AM, you had to have a licensed operator on duty 24 hours a day. So I figured that was my way in the door. What did I know about announcing? But I used to sit there during the afternoons for the Scotty Wainwright show. Right. He was doing, this was 1969. He was doing afternoons, and then B.J. Dean was on at night with the open house oldies party in between from 6 to 7, and that had a variety of hosts. But I just sat there and soaked it all in, and that's how I actually learned how to...
Didn't take, though, huh?
Bada boom.
That old radio jokester.
Well, it's funny because you and I were from the same high school. You were a couple of years before me, but if you listen to the radio, you were always listening to ORC, basically.
That's right.
And you, if you were a listener, it was a passionate thing with the radio stations back then. You just didn't listen to the radio, and just go down the dial. Yeah. You actually, knew who was on the air.
How about the Super Hoopers? People filled gyms to watch us play basketball.
Yeah, we formed a basketball team.
They didn't do that to watch the teachers.
That's
I think
right.
They came to watch us.
We were the turntable terrors and the Super Hoopers. This may sound a little strange, but we obviously realized that this all took place on 1310 AM. But they're a talk station. They do what they do, and
right.
We wish them the best. But we're talking about here on a station where we play oldies now, and that's what people's memories are locked in to the personalities and to the oldies. And that's why we thought this would be a good idea to bring back people who were on the radio back in that era and kind of enjoy what once was, the only station to listen to, the station playing the music that we're playing now, these great memories. And they're entwined in everything that we did.
Before we move on from the names we were mentioning, I don't know if this one got mentioned, but I was doing afternoon drive at one point, and the newswoman on the other side of the glass was Meredith Vieira.
Yeah, she was the news person when I was doing middays there for a while, too.
Yeah, and I was doing afternoon drive at that time a little bit, too. But you're absolutely right. Meredith Vieira, who everybody knows now from The View and from she was on 60 Minutes and The Millionaire Show. Yeah. Her first radio job, as a matter of fact, the last time I checked on the website, she still lists Worcester as her first radio job.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So,
well, you know, one thing I've noticed on Millionaire, she hugs everybody in sight. She never hugged anybody when she
No,
worked with us.
you know, she was pretty quiet when she was here. If I remember her correctly,
well, the engineers would come down and leer at her for 4 hours. That would make you kind of quiet.
Yeah, that's why
she was right out of college.
She was the view.
She always a nice-looking girl, and I believe she was actually hired by Dick the Derby Smith. I think he actually was her first boss. But we're going to hear from Phil Lagis, who couldn't be with us in person. As we mentioned, he literally does work for NASA. That's not a joke. And he's in Florida. He couldn't be up here. So it must be another shuttle they're working on.
I don't know. They locked them in.
So we've taken a little interview with Phil Lagis, and he does talk a little bit about the day that Meredith actually showed up at the radio station. But I want to go back to Norm Laramie again a little bit because Norm. Yeah, we could have called him Woody Woodpecker. Norm Laramie was the program director at the radio station for, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4 years or something like that. But the guy always had his carpenter jeans on and a flannel shirt, and you know, he'd get on the air and say, more music with Norm Laramie. But
more music with Clyde Anderson.
But what he did in between was knock walls down and cut boards and
put up wind tunnels.
And put up wind tunnels. And
I'm going to let Clyde get into a story, but one story I want to get into. I remember coming up as a teenager, and Dave O'Gara, you were the first guy that you let me in the door because I sat in during a B.J. Dean show one time. And I went in one time, and the studio was vast. I mean, you had that big horseshoe-shaped studio. About 3 weeks later, after Norm had gotten involved in it, there were 700 rooms there. There was a venting system that went throughout the whole thing, and all the studios were into like little closets.
Yeah, it
was amazing what he did.
When I first started working there, the studio was huge, as you alluded to, and I'll never forget this. B.J. Dean was on at night, and he brought in Killer Kowalski to interview. Matter of fact, I think it might have been Len Talbot or somebody who actually sat at. They had a table where Bob Breyer used to sit doing his show, and Killer Kowalski came in to do an interview. And I didn't know that this was prearranged, okay? Because what happens was he was promoting a wrestling match over at the auditorium, the Worcester Auditorium. And so BJ was at the controls, and I think it was Len Talbot doing the interview across the table with him. And at some point, Killer Kowalski got mad and overturned the table. And I was in the corner. I was just as the engineer there, and the guy tossed the table. And I was just shaking in my boots. I thought I was done. I thought the guy was going to go on a rampage. And they had it's like wrestling now. They had pre-planned this whole thing to turn the table over and to go nuts just to promote the auditorium wrestling show. It was that kind of nutty stuff.
You know, those things aren't going to happen anymore. And then that's some of the things that, you know, people have to understand that Clyde, myself, and Dave have remained friends throughout since we, you know, started knowing one another in the business, and those days are gone. I think, as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, and by the way, and that's not to put down what's currently going on in radio.
Definitely not.
It's just a different time. It's just done differently.
That was then. This is now.
That's right. I mean, it's like when you watch those specials on NBC. You know, they have their 75th anniversary, and you see Milton Berle doing a show, and something goes wrong, or an old red skeleton or something. It's been refined, and it works better now actually than it did before.
No question about it.
But when it didn't work, you had to scramble a little bit. As a matter of fact, Clyde was talking with Bill Garcia just before he went off, where Bill screwed up a weather situation. What was that deal?
Well, he was just supposed to play a jingle and go into a record, and he had forgotten to take out the previous jingle, the weather jingle. So it went WAAB weather. Of course, a lot more melodious than that. And then he goes, "Oh, well, whether or not, I guess you want the Beatles," or whatever came on. He was just so cool about how he segged into it. He just slid right over it.
You had to be pretty quick. Listen, we're going to play a song from the 60s era here in just a second, but what I'd like to do first is just mention that Cafe 85 has brought the food down that everybody's enjoying today, and you can join us live at 250 Commercial Street. If you're just getting out of work, come on down and say hello to the guys, maybe have a picture taken. And I know Joe Coggins was getting asked for his autograph. And
Wait,
Bill Garcia,
I got to say, I signed my first autograph in 20 years.
Oh, really? How did it feel?
Right.
Okay.
It was great. My hand is still
working. Was it good for you?
It was a guy from the courthouse, though, I noticed.
Well, it was an subpoena. That's what it was.
So,
Can you say that on the radio?
Actually, we're going to play a song from the 70s, because we were talking about the 70s, so I don't want to screw up our guys back in the studio downstairs. And
let them.
No.
We used to have to run around. Say something different and let them run around down there.
All right, let's see how on top of things he really is then. We want to hear California Nights by Leslie Gore. It's on one of the hotkeys. Let's see if we can find that. We're talking with Gary Scott and Clyde Anderson, who were both on the radio for a long time, during the 70s primarily. And you guys really saw a change in the music. We went from the Beatles breaking up in 1970 through the whole disco era, which made many of us cringe. But, interestingly enough, as Gary and I, especially through the years, have done mobile DJ work, that a lot of the so-called disco songs that we cringed at, the popular ones, the real top 40 ones, have lasted.
That's what everybody wants to hear.
Saturday Night Fever and Turn the Beat Around and Casey and the Sunshine Band and that sort of thing.
Well, you speak of Saturday Night Fever, and Clyde and I both have become big Bee Gee fans because I think they got a bad rap towards the end. They really did. And so if you listen to some of their music that was not what you'd call disco, it's great. The writing is great. The singing is great.
Well, we obviously play a lot of the Bee Gees stuff. It's like they had three careers, really. They had the first days where they played Massachusetts, and we obviously play those songs, and Lonely Days, and then the disco stuff kind of crept into their repertoire, which was huge. But then they came back after that to have some best-selling albums and do those VH1 concerts.
Right.
And it's tragic that Morris died not too long ago. It sounds like something that shouldn't have happened, by the way, in today's medical science. But that's another story for another time.
Yeah.
Listen, what I wanted to talk about, well, we did lose some icons along the way.
I wanted to say Fanny, Be Tender with My Love. Remember how we used to intro that?
That's right.
That was a big thing for a DJ to say Fanny on the air.
That's a record we don't have.
Then you can turn it around and say, "Love, be tender with my."
That's right. Well, we had to play fast and loose with the titles of songs way back when. But we did have things go wrong from time to time, and one of the people that was instrumental behind the scenes that you folks never heard of was a fellow by the name of Rick Kennedick. And Rick is an excellent engineer and knows a lot about radio transmitters and studio work. And Clyde, didn't you have a story about how you had to call Rick one time, and was it late at night, or what was the deal on that?
Well, you got the right table, but the wrong guy. Gary is the one that had to make the call. He was off the air, right?
Yeah, I was off the air. I think I was doing a Saturday night show at the time, and we were off the air.
This is good.
And the transmitter, you go and check everything. You check all the technical stuff. The transmitter's on the air. The control board is working. Everything is going smoothly. So, of course, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to call your chief engineer up. I call up Rick. Rick, I said, I don't know what's going on here. I said, the transmitter's going on. Everything's on. I can make the readings. The board's working. He goes, he says, that's got to be that pencil that's holding together one of those relays in the back of the board. I said, you're kidding, huh? He goes, no. And I went back behind the board, wiggled it just a little bit.
Station's back, huh?
Station's back on the air. So
we had...
it was a number 2 pencil, by the way.
Oh, okay. Johnny Dowd. Yeah.
Come on, Ed.
All right.
You're the guy running the whole thing.
Johnny Dowd was on the radio for a while in Worcester, and Johnny Dowd is here with a story. John?
Well, I was on. I think I was filling in middays back in, had to be when I was there. Someone was sick middays. Who was it? Maybe I think I filled in for Dick one day. And I had my first contest I had to give away. I had a TV from one of the maybe old coins.
Yep.
One of the someone just walked in and said, "You got a TV to give away." I didn't know in those days. It was sort of.
We had chewing gum to give away. I remember.
And pencils, and I had to give it away live, and I chose the name, and I called the winner on the air, and we didn't have a tape delay, we didn't have it recorded, we didn't have what they have today, a shortcut, we just potted her up. And I said, I guess maybe her name was Mary Jones or from Marlboro, you won a brand new TV from O'Coins. And her response was, hot spoop.
The S word, yeah.
I had never had anyone swear on the air back to me. I dropped the phone, fired Donka Shane, and that was it. That was the story.
You're in trouble when you go to a Wayne Newton record to bail yourself out.
And that was it, and you heard the clunk of the phone. And,
wow. And amazingly enough, your career continued, and thank God for that, right? I was doing all nights at the time, and on the control board, we had what we call the triple stack. It was we had graduated from having tape players individual to 3 tape players in one. And for some reason, something was going wrong in the control board. It was crackly or something. And the engineer had always said, well, you can kind of go inside and turn the volume control a little bit. And it's carbon buildup. He says, you'll clean it right out. Well, they forgot to tell me that the triple stack machine was not bolted to the top of the control board. So when I lifted it up, of course, the machine fell on the floor. And those things weighed about 50 or 60 pounds. They were heavy. And it ripped the AC right out of the back. So now I had no way to play any commercials. I could play the records, but I had no way to play commercials. So
that was bad.
Our engineer at the time, rest his soul, the late Bob Lund, was driving through Shrewsbury or so at the time, and he said, "Hey, I'm down at Dunkin' Donuts. Want me to bring you a coffee?" I said, "Bring your expertise. I don't need a coffee right now." I said, "Get my tape machine back." So Bob comes up and I said, "I don't have my tools with me." He said, "So he says, here's what you can do." He says, "You take the fuse out of the back of the machine. You strip the wire from the plug and jammed it into the fuse and put the cap back on the fuse, and you had power." So he said, "That'll get you through the night until the engineer takes care of it." Bob wasn't even working for us. It was still Rick, I think. And he just was a friend who helped me out and get the machine back on the air. But Bob came to visit about 4 years later. And I was showing him around the studio, and we had that same triple stack machine, and the wire was still jammed in the back. It hadn't been touched in 4 years.
We ran out of pencils.
I mean, it was those kind of crazy things that happened. And,
it is. I mean, Clyde did some great reconstruction work in the station without nobody knowing it back then.
Gary started the story about 20 minutes ago with Norm Laramie's carpentry work. Norm made all these small studios everywhere, so that means you now need ventilation. So do you remember that wind tunnel system that he created? Yeah. Well, after he created that, back in those days, I appreciated a lot of extra air conditioning.
And I can attest to that, because I used to come on at midnight, and for the first hour until I could open the windows and warm the place up, I'd wear my jacket, because he kept the thing like a walk-in freezer.
Well, I had a 300-watt light bulb on the little thing that makes the air conditioner stay on, and the thing never went off.
Here's what they did. There's this guy, Norm Laramie. This is what he did. He was the program director of the radio station, though, but he fancied himself a carpenter. Yeah. What this guy did was he as Clyde said, he took one huge studio and compartmentalized it and made it into a bunch of small rooms. And the old Capitol building where we were in downtown Worcester was adjacent to us in the, I don't remember the name of the building that we were in. But anyway, there was just a little alleyway between the two buildings. And that's where the air conditioner was, out into this alleyway. And it was a giant air conditioner. I don't know how many BTUs it was.
About 35,000.
It was a giant air conditioner.
It was so big it had a name. It was the Southerner.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Anyway, the copper thermostat was extended outside. Somebody had opened up the air conditioner.
He did. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
And the thermostat, this copper thing, was dangling outside, and we took a little desk lamp and took the cover off.
It was a flood lamp, Dave. It wasn't a desk lamp.
And in order to make it run all the time, to keep the temperature up, this thing was laying on the light bulb.
Well, he was right. It was a lamp to begin with, but 60 watts wasn't good enough.
For you.
I was up to 300 watts. That's what kept it on.
Now you have this air conditioner cranking in the library, but you still had to get the air down the hall into the three studios. We had the main studio, the newsroom, and the production studio. And this guy, Norm Laramie, again, the program director, built this thing where he had a vent in the back of the library, hooked up to a fan the size of an airplane propeller, and it was sucking the air out of this air conditioner, allegedly, into all these vents going all the way down the hall. I don't know how many feet that was, but most of it went into the main studio.
The strange thing is it actually did work, though, but it worked not really. You couldn't really feel the air coming out of the main studio, and that was not acceptable. So I took that metal grill work off one day, and I started stuffing rags up there, and pretty soon all the air was coming into the main studio. So for the first half hour, all of a sudden I see the needles jumping around on the records. I said, gee, that's a little odd. That's never happened before. I finally figured out that I had aimed this entire force of this helicopter-sized propeller right onto the record, so I had to turn the grill work around.
Right, people have to remember, we played records back then, so we had to be careful for little things.
Matter of fact, we're going to play one right now, because Gary and Clyde are very, very big Beatle fans. We'll talk a little bit about that coming up in a couple of minutes, but why don't we get on a Beatle tune? We are an oldie station after all, and we are having some fun reminiscing, but the Beatles are on right now at WORC-FM, Oldies 98.9.
You'll never know.
WORC-FM, Oldies 98.9, the great hits of the 60s and 70s. I said a Beatles tune, but I got the Beatle guys here, the Beatle buddies. Who was singing lead on that song, Gary?
Oh, God, wasn't it George, I think?
Yeah, I wasn't even hearing it. We were having so much fun chatting.
Do you want to know a secret?
That's a good one.
Yeah, George.
No, that was one of the early ones that George Harrison sang lead. Let's talk a little bit about the Beatles, because I know Gary has done the Beatles show here for years, and you guys actually did the Beatles show together.
We started it in back 95?
I think it was, yeah.
95.
It took Gary about 30 shows, but he finally figured out how to get rid of me, and he's been solo ever since.
The Beatles obviously are a big part of the history. When we talked with Bill Garcia, and we're going to talk with Dick Smith about that later on, but just in general, let's talk about the Beatles as a staying power, as the current entity that they are.
Here's a way to start what we're going to do talking about the Beatles. Gary and I looked at Dick Smith's She Loves You gold record for years, and to this day wondered why it didn't disappear somehow.
Yeah, I'd look at that and I'd go, would he notice if it was off the wall?
Yeah,
But no, I mean, you talk about the staying power, and Clyde and I being the big Beatle fans that we are, we're constantly amazed at how, and I've said this before, how a band that hasn't even been together in over, 30 years, just
33 years.
1969 was the last
was the
real
last
recording.
time they were in the studio.
Yeah, September of August of '69 was the last time all
right.
four of them were together in the
And
studio.
how, they're putting out music right now. Yes, and it's some of the old stuff, but I honestly think that it's because the music that's out now, which is good, but you don't hear a lot of the feeling, I don't think, that was in what the Beatles did. And I really think...
Well, something obviously resonates with people when an album like Number One, which came out a couple of years ago, would go to number one in 30 different countries with songs that had been issued a million times before.
Oh, sure.
But
There's no other act ever. You can't name one that was number one right from the very first record all the way through their entire career, right to the last record. No one else has ever come close to that. So they were doing something right.
And to that end, I want to mention for you folks who come down and visit us as you get out of work today, that the band Yellow Submarine, who play quite often around the Worcester area, will be here to do a 3-song set of Beatles tunes. You guys will appreciate that. They'll be here doing 3 tunes right around 5 o'clock this afternoon. So we're looking forward to that. We're chatting with Gary Scott and Clyde Anderson, who were on Worcester Radio back in the 70s and having some fun reminiscing about some of the things that went right and some of the things that went wrong. And you can join us at 250 Commercial Street in downtown Worcester. My name is Dave O'Gara. We'll be back after a commercial break right here at WORC-FM, Oldies 98.9.
WO1310.
We'll be back with the WORC-FM radio reunion after this on WORC-FM, Oldies 98.9.